The broker, when I went to sell my business, would say things like, honey, do you know what a balance sheet is? Is something where I feel like women have to know what their value is in terms of what they're worth. I love having strong women that I can coach up and help them have confidence.
She just sold her company. She sat in a room full of men negotiating the biggest deal of her lifetime. Wait, she sold for how much? I can't even believe she managed to get double her valuation. Let's keep this just between us.
Welcome, Susan, to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. And I'm interested in the story of your agency. You know, I always love to interview agency founders because it's a space that I know so well. And I was particularly struck by the name of yours, especially being out of the DC area, News Generation. So tell me about how that got started and how you got into that space first.
So I was fresh out of business school. And as I was finishing, I had a client from Microsoft that I was visiting in New York. And she said to me, you should think about starting an agency when you graduate. And I literally had job offers sitting on my desk with signing bonuses and all of that. And I thought, gosh, I could probably do this, right? I was all of 26 years old. So a friend of mine who I worked with at the time, she and I kind of would go to coffee and think about what it would be like to start a business. And the name came from, this was in the early days of WordPerfect, found a whole bunch of words that we loved.
Okay.
And then we just put them in two different columns and kept shifting. So it would read like good news and news generation and the next generation. And it clicked and we both looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, this is it.
Wow. I actually have not heard of that. So I can picture it like going, News Generation. That is so cool. Okay. So you start News Generation, and when it starts, what is News Generation? Is it just you? What are you offering?
It was an agency that did radio media relations, meaning we got our clients on news and public affairs programming on radio stations and networks across the country.
Okay.
So TV is the much more glamorous older sister of radio. But I've always loved talk radio. I remember doing a nostalgia club in 7th grade and talking about the War of the Worlds and just hearing the audio and thinking how powerful that was. And so I always was kind of a news junkie, went to undergrad, studied poli-sci and econ, and then decided I wanted to shift more to the business world. And I don't think I ever lost that love for public policy. And so this company allowed me the ability to work on public policy issues and then also start a business. So I worked at an agency. I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years, about a year and a half before I started business school. And then when I was in business school, worked at a PR agency. So I had some pretty good experience by the time I started my company.
So you have a niche when you launch. You say, okay, so this is like also, it's very good, like B-school thinking, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to niche. I'm going to be in public affairs content on radio using a specific medium, which by the way, I happen to love radio. I grew up in terrestrial, as they say, terrestrial radio.
Yep.
I was a local salesperson for radio stations for many years and then went on to be a sales manager. So I know the effect. Yes, you would have sold. We definitely would have like interacted at that time. Really, really cool. And I just think that local media has the chance to impact at a greater scale. Of course, it's very different now. But, you know, radio is totally different. But but I know I can totally picture this. So how do you go from being, okay, I'm going to start this, then it's me, to becoming what ultimately became a sellable asset?
Well, I started with a business partner. And she was not an equity partner. She didn't put in any cash. She was an employee from the beginning.
Okay.
And then from our old agency, we had 2 women that had recently left the agency because they were moms.
Okay.
And we decided to hire them to freelance for us. So there were 4 of us when we started.
Okay. I have questions about this.
Okay.
So you decide you want to start the agency. You bring on a partner. You're working with a partner, but they don't buy in. They're not equity. They start as employee. Was that something that was important to you? How did you grapple with that? Because sometimes, and even when you're bringing on the other people, like you're starting out, there's not a lot of cash. Like we all know this, right? When you're starting out, you're bringing on these people and it's like you either sacrifice cash or control. If that makes sense. Like you bring someone on as equity partner, you're giving up a little bit of control. You bring someone as just an employee, you're giving up cash. How did you come to the decision? And was it easy with all of you negotiating like what someone would be paid, how you could get this started? Tell me about that.
The backstory on that is my parents always super supportive.
Yep.
And I had the confidence at such a young age to start a business because they never told me I couldn't, right? They always were encouraging me. And when I was young, I played on a boys' baseball team. It was that kind of household.
Good fun fact.
Yes.
Oh, love that.
So when I finished business school, I was in New York with my client from Microsoft who suggested after a bottle or so of wine that I start my own company.
Yep.
I mentioned it to my mom, who was always very entrepreneurial. And my dad was he was a government prosecutor his entire career. So kind of that safe career. And then my mom was able to go off and she started a magazine and old folks homes. And she just was always had her hands in different things.
Yep.
So my parents said, hey, why don't you just write up a business plan? Share it with us. So like a good MBA student.
Yes.
I went online and this was 1997.
Okay.
And I wrote up a plan and sent it to them. And at the end, it asked for cash needed.
Okay.
So I was like 3 months of Lynn, who was the employee, freelancers, office space. Back then, nobody worked from home. So of course I needed.
Of course, you need an office. Right. The world is so different. The kids don't even know.
The kids don't.
They don't know. Yes. Okay. So you have needed.
Yes. So the bottom line was I needed $14,530 for the first 90 days.
Okay.
And sent them the business plan. 2 days later, there's a check mailed to me for that exact amount. And on the memo line, it just said, go for it. So how fortunate was I? I had done things like I owned a small condo at the time. I prepaid my mortgage.
Okay.
My business school loans weren't starting for 6 months.
Okay.
I prepaid my car payment. Like I did all of the things that a 26-year-old could do. I met my husband after I was in business for about 5 months. So he never knew me as a
business. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just did all the things. And then within 90 days, I was cash flow positive, got clients right away. Microsoft, I had a little snafu with them in that came to us, they guaranteed a certain amount of business for our first year. And then their PR firm bought an agency that competed with us. Oof. So they came to me and said, for 90 days, we need to work with this other agency. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I spent that 90 days literally pouring through every directory, going to every networking event, cold calling everybody. If I didn't have that, like at the time, it was so stressful. But if I didn't have that 90 days to earn clients like the American Federation of Teachers and Fleischman Hillard, I don't know if I would have been able to stay in business.
Yeah, you probably would have been so dependent on Microsoft that the second they did go away, and they eventually would, you would have been stuck. So it's good. That's a really, really good story for people listening who feel like, oh my gosh, when the rug gets pulled out from under me, what do I do? And you just really pounded the pavement. That's
we just went and pounded the pavement. And I will say Microsoft, like I'm doing something with them today. Like for 26 years, they have been an incredible client through different PR agencies. So I've been very, very fortunate. But that 90 days was my catapult and my lesson to, you can't ever sit and go, I'm good, right? As an entrepreneur, you always have to move forward. It doesn't always feel like it, but you always have to be doing.
So how did who you were then translate into who you became? And talk to me about that evolution as you grew. What were the largest number of employees you had? What services did you offer? I assume you ended up moving beyond radio a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I was not a quick growth person, meaning there was one year, of course, when you're small, it's easy to grow 68%.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. I always say this.
Yeah. So I think first year, there were 4 of us. The second year, there were 8 of us. We got to 12. And then it was like, after that, I added a person or 2 a year. Even though we were growing at a good clip, I was very efficient in the way I ran my business. We had a great process. We had great employees. The thing I love about small companies is you can't hide, right?
That's right.
So when you work for a larger organization, people can kind of sit back and not be accountable. Yeah. And it takes a certain kind of person to work for a small business. And I had this office space here where I still am, and it's an office condo. So I purchased it about 5 or 6 years into owning the business. So that became another area of cash flow, but then also a place where we all could gather until, of course, COVID. So just having that small family feeling was great. I mean, we went through a lot of tough times, losing parents, and great times having babies, buying houses. And it was, I adore the people that supported my business and that I worked with, many until the acquisition. Some left during the acquisition, and some left post-acquisition.
So it sounds like you were all very close. You buy this condo. That's another asset. That's part of the office. That stands as an office building. And you're growing as sort of a close, not necessarily family unit, but like a group that's like a core yes. group. And you sold in 2020, right? Did you sell?
I sold in 2020. So I was approached in 2018. The company that initially approached me was the company I ended up selling to. But in the meantime, I did have a couple of other offers.
Let's start talking about that. So you're growing, and you're like, what I hear a lot of is like very culturally aligned. Like you guys have a good vibe. There's like something going on there. You're going through long periods of time, because if you started in the 90s, now you're getting to the 2000 teens.
Yeah.
You guys all really know each other. You have a workflow, you have a process, you have a whole thing. When does selling enter your mind? Was it more reactive that people were approaching you? Was it more proactive? And did you always think about it as something that would one day sell? I'm trying to guess, but I know you went to business school. So in that sense, you might think of it that way. But I also hear the steady, smart lifestyle growth of like, I don't need to be a rocket ship. I'm building a good culture. So I'm very curious. I can't predict your answer.
It was a bit reactive when I sold. And one major sort of spark was I was going to Miraval, which is a spa in Arizona. I go there every June. I have since my twins were born. So they're just about to turn 18. So been going there a long time. And I will
yourself, or you go with friends?
I go with friends. There's 8 of us that go. So at any given time, that's super fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Good praise.
I was feeling very rundown, sort of underappreciated.
Okay.
And it's kind of like my recharge to go to Miraval.
Okay.
So I am from DC to Atlanta. I land in Atlanta. I get a phone call from one of my employees. 2 employees had gotten into an argument and one quit while I was on the plane going to Arizona. And that moment I was like, I was so down. I was in a down cycle, as all entrepreneurs have. And then that happened. And I was like, okay, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Yep.
50 was creeping up on the horizon, turning 50.
Yep.
I was talking with a friend, and I remember thinking, am I one day just going to like close the door and be like, that's it, news gen's done?
Yeah.
Or am I going to sell something that's a valuable asset? So those two things kind of coupled together allowed me the opportunity to kind of open up to the universe. Like, maybe I should start thinking about this. And then I kid you not, 2 days after I got back from Miraval, I got a call. Would you ever think about selling? So that's how the journey started. And I was open to it.
Okay, so I heard a few things. So what led to this was first of all, turning 50 or having a major life change of any capacity definitely, I think, accelerates this. For me, it was my daughter going to college. I have no idea why.
Yep. Okay.
My oldest, like, I got her through and I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready. The other thing that I heard was the frustration point. Like, nobody thinks about selling when they're really on a high unless they're totally approached. But like, just the minutia of like, this one quits, this one's arguing, the people, like, it's really, really hard.
Yep.
And then like feeling a little depleted. And then the approach comes. So it must have felt like a sign. But this was 2018, you said?
This was 2018. Yes.
Okay. This is 2018. You don't actually sell until 2020. So what happens?
Yes. So I get the call. I start talking, and then I have a good friend who is a broker. He's a salesperson for a broker.
Okay.
And so he said, "Oh, if you're getting approached for a potential acquisition, you got to broaden your scope. You can't just go with one person. Right? You got to." Yeah. And I was like, of course, that women speak, which drives me crazy. And I've overcome it. But this was 6 years ago. And I was like, oh, but my business isn't worth anything. It's just me.
I hear that all the time.
Right. Yeah. And I certainly don't have anything of value. Now, I obviously changed my team.
How many employees did you have at the time? How many employees?
18.
Okay, great.
18. And so I decided that I was going to put together a prospectus, and it went out to a number of companies. I still get requests. I mean, it's so funny how long that stuff stays out there.
Yes.
But I had 3 serious bidders, and the one that originally called me is the one I went with.
So when you were first approached by them, did you have a good gut feeling? Were there red flags? How did you feel when they approached you?
I had a good gut feeling. I really did. I liked the CEO. The people that I met were nice. They were small. They were not much bigger than us. They were maybe 24 people.
Great.
And so it felt more like, and I had been in business a lot longer in the US. They started in the UK. They operated there for about 5 years.
Okay.
And then they moved to the US, and they were acquiring people and small businesses to grow instead of organically grow.
Did they have funding to do it? Did they get funding from PE, or they were financing it on their own as a small business?
They, I believe, had funding. I don't know a lot of.
You don't know for sure
their funding came from, but they had some. Yes,
but they weren't PE backed. In other words, okay, got it.
No, I think they were privately.
Friends
and family. Yep,
got it. Friends and family. Got it. Okay. So here's my question: did going out with a broker and putting it out there, do you think it drove up the price of what they would have paid, or do you think that you probably could have negotiated that with them without going out and getting other offers?
I think what it did was it built my confidence in knowing I'm worth a lot more than.
So you tested the market with it. It's like you put it out there, and it validates the fact that they want to buy you.
Yes.
And then, interesting.
I had 3 very important items that were not financial related. One is I wanted to keep my office space. Right?
You did not sell it. You want to sell it
because I love this space, and it's an asset. Like it's a growing asset for myself, my family.
Yes.
I wanted to keep all my employees for at least a year, and unless they did something egregious, like that was written in the contract. And I still wanted to teach at American University. So I teach 3 classes a year there. I didn't want them to tell me I couldn't teach. So I wanted the autonomy to do that.
Okay.
And then number 4 was money.
Yeah.
So the negotiation worked well for the company that acquired mine, because they were all about the money.
Right.
So I was able to get those items, which meant more to me than a huge sum of money.
100%. It's almost never about the money in its entirety for women. Like, the money is important.
Sure.
Getting paid what you're worth is important. But also looking at the whole person and what their desires are and what they want their life to be like is so important. And I always try and emphasize that on this show. Like, the money is important. Yes, we should be paid gobs of money, but we also should really get a clear picture of what we want and what we want next, because so many people after they sell are just depressed. Like, you get the difference between, a few 100,000 or even $1 million, right? If you're talking about that range, let's even say it's 5 million when you're looking at a big number. At the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference. It makes a difference, but what is more important is your entire life. And I love how you articulated that and knew that in this negotiation. So that's very exciting. Okay, so you get in, you run the process. Do you take a little break and do you wait a little bit, or is it 2 years of negotiating? And how is that on you and where your focus is on the business?
So we had this broker who would kind of halt things. He wasn't very good at bringing us together. So what we ended up doing, the CEO, my current boss, and I, was we kind of eliminated him from the process.
Correct. That's what I was going to ask you, because he approached you. I was going to say, what's the role for that anyway? Sometimes it just slows it down.
Yeah. And he would say one thing to Ed, our CEO, and then Ed would come to me and go, "Wait, is this not happening?" I'm like, "No, it is." Like, so Ed and I had this relationship where we could just go and talk very honestly, but it like fits and starts. It would be, things would slow down for whatever reason, and then for a month or two we'd be quiet, and then it would start again. And many times it was sparked by somebody would contact me and be like, "I heard you're selling. Would you be interested in?" Mm-hmm. And so it was more information gathering for me, so that I was able to sort of refocus. Because I think when you're a CEO and it becomes your baby, and you're so intertwined with your identity with the company.
Yeah.
That I definitely went through times where I was like, "I don't want to do this. No, I really do. No, I don't." Right? You have that inner conversation.
Totally.
And so then it became about 6 months out from when we actually signed the paperwork that I was all in. And so it wasn't a constant year of chatting, but once we got to that final negotiating offer letter of intent, we were pretty good. We were supposed to sign before the end of 2019.
Okay.
But then, of course, lawyers get involved and all of that. And we didn't sign. We were all set to sign in early March, right before COVID. And something happened with one of our documents, because I had to sell my rights. Like, there was like 5 or 6 different things, and one thing got tripped up. And then COVID hits. And I remember saying, like, "We could put this off for a couple weeks if you want." And they're like, "Nope, we're ready to go ahead." So we signed the paperwork, and on April 24th. And so we were about 5-6 weeks into COVID, which was
wow. So your whole world is in upheaval, actually.
Yes.
You're making this major transaction.
Yep.
You're going through COVID with your family. I mean,
Yep.
How old were your boys? I think you have 2 boys or girls?
I have 3 boys. I had, so this was 5 years ago. So I had a 15-year-old and 2 13-year-olds.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to navigate. You're navigating all that. You're navigating the sale. How do you feel when it's done? I assume you signed virtually? I signed virtually.
We signed everything except for that one last document.
Yep.
And that was in end of January.
Okay.
So like 5 weeks before.
Or that was before everything. So it was,
yes,
the world was still somewhat normal.
So our CEO came here to our office. We had everybody in the office. We had a few people that were working remotely.
Yeah.
And we made the announcement. and he had champagne, and then we all went out and had a nice steak dinner like you should. And that was super fun.
Oh, yeah, I missed out on all of that because
Yeah.
we sold in April 2021, and it was like,
Okay,
yeah,
so
it was really, really.
that's a bummer. Actually, that was a really fun time. And then the last piece of paperwork was very unceremonious because it was during COVID.
But it was just paperwork. So you weren't, because you had already announced with your team and everything, this is a done deal. Okay. How does it feel after you sell? And now I assume you're still working for the company today, right? Aren't you?
I am. I have one thing was that I would not do again is they really wanted a 5-year commitment from me. And 5 years is way too long, right? So much can happen. And I would do 18 months to 2 years again. I would not do. But the CEO, and he's right, kept saying, you're so synonymous with the name News Gen that if you step away, we won't have a good enough foothold with your clients. And he was right. Absolutely.
But don't you think after a few years, I don't know, for me, it was like, yes,
yeah,
I understand. I was likable. You were News Gen, like with us. But after a few years, like they know you sold, like it either exists on its own or it doesn't. And
part of the challenge was they were new to the US. So nobody knew who they were. Oh, but everybody knew who we were because I'd been out there marketing and, doing all of the networking events and sponsoring everything. And then they decided one day that the name News Gen was just going away. And all these clients were like, wait, what happened? And they never really sort of explained the transition to the marketplace. And I feel like, and I've made this, no, that was a big fail because they could have really capitalized on our name to grow their value, especially in the DC market. And they really didn't do that because they wanted us to be under.
Oh, so this is interesting. So I think that, I talk about this all the time. What makes a successful acquisition is the ability to successfully integrate and find the synergies where you can soar together. Right. But so many times it's a miss because of either ego or, strategies that don't pan out and all of that stuff. It's really challenging. And then I think being there while that's happening is really, really hard.
Yes. And the first year and a half, it was great. Like I have to be honest, I was able to drive a lot in terms of, because our operations team was much bigger than theirs. So we were able to come in and automatically make an impact, sort of grow their client satisfaction. There was another company that was kind of failing in our space, and the CEO kept hiring people from that company to a point where that culture of that old company, that company that we were picking people off from, became the company's Gen.
Yes, your own company change.
Yes. It was 4Media. I mean, at that point, it wasn't News Gen.
They had changed the name already to 4Media.
4Media was the company that acquired.
Yes, it was the company that acquired you, and then they did away with the name.
They did away with it, but literally, still, people will say, like, I got a note yesterday: can News Gen handle this upcoming project in 2025? Like, some people don't even know 4Media because they just think Susan News Gen. But of course, my email is different and some things, but we're certainly not out there in the way that my old company was.
Yeah.
So I could see how it's confusing to people.
Yeah. So as you look back on this experience, you already mentioned don't do a 5-year contract.
Yes.
Is there anything else you would have done differently?
It's one of those things you don't know what you don't know until you do it.
Yep.
So I think I did the best I could every moment at the time that I had to make a decision. So it's not like, oh, I shouldn't have done it at this time. I mean, nobody knew what was going to happen with COVID, but I kind of like to live with no regrets. Like I'm pretty good at like that gut feeling. I definitely had a few situations where I was like, that's not right. That doesn't seem right. And another thing that I did when I first got acquired was I was big and bold in the new organization. Especially the women had a harder time with that the women from the company that was acquiring them.
Oh.
And so I kind of got a number of slaps on the wrist, like, that's not what we do here, and you need to slow your roll. And I was like, oh, but I thought I was being hired so that I could
have an impact. Yeah.
had an impact. And that was not wanted. And that was an ego power thing. It wasn't a workflow thing. And it took me a while to go, well, why wouldn't they want, like, I have this awesome system and I've got these, awesome processes, and the way that we do things is very streamlined. And the company, when they purchased, For Media was in its infancy stage of operations. So to me, it felt like, gosh, I can help them so much.
Right. Like, why wouldn't they want me? Like, look at why wouldn't they want my thoughts? Because my thoughts are so great.
I'm so amazing.
I'm so amazing. And why wouldn't they want me? I completely relate. And I'm certain that we are not alone in that experience of going to a new place and feeling like, it's also like, we're used to running the show.
Yeah, he's correct.
To leading. And then all of a sudden you're like, you have this place, and then you have to like know your place.
Yep.
And it's a really, really challenging transition. But I assume, I mean, I know you live with no regrets anyway, but I assume overall, looking back, it's a great transition for you. And now as you're nearing your 5-year, you're pretty close. This is 2025. This is it.
Yeah. Right? I've got like 4 months left. Yeah.
Woo! So what's next for you? What's next for you, Susan? What's next in your world?
So I teach at AU, which I absolutely love. Yeah. And I teach women in leadership, which is a course I co-created. I teach business ethics, which I love. And I coach women business owners that are looking to start, grow, and scale their businesses. So I feel like, especially going through the sale of a business, that I have some knowledge that not a lot of people have.
Yep.
Especially being a woman. Like, the broker, when I went to sell my business, would say things like, honey, do you know what a balance sheet is? Like,
it's so dismissive. It's so dismissive.
It was awful, awful, awful. So that is something where I feel like women have to know what their value is in terms of what they're worth, right? And I love having women, strong women, that I can coach up and help them have confidence. Because sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know if I should go for that job, or I don't know if I should. And I'm the one that's like, you absolutely should. Like, there's all these men that are not qualified, but they have confidence and they're getting the jobs. And so the delta just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So it's in that space of women in leadership, and my colleague and I own a consultancy called Empowered. And it's about going out and talking with corporate America about ways to lift women, create a pipeline, grow a pipeline, get women on boards, get women funding, kind of all of those things. So I don't know exactly what the future looks like, but I am spending a lot of time in the next 4 months sort of reflecting on that.
But it's bright. Whatever future is it's bright. And because you were able, I mean, that is the one benefit of the 5 years. You have 5 years to prepare. You have 5 years to say, okay, I'm going to process that this is no longer news gen. You have 5 years to say, okay, I'm going to think about what's next. So that's the one bright side. It does feel long, though. I always say, like, I did 3 years, but it feels like 20 in dog years. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
and what was nice is I have still a ton of autonomy.
Yep.
Where I can really I don't miss anything with my boys. I work when I need to, and I'm really good at managing my time. Yes. So I don't have anybody kind of looking over my shoulder because my results are there.
Yes.
So that is a huge bright spot. So I know I'm not going to be in a position where I sit at a desk and somebody watches to make sure I'm there. I like to lead with efficiency, and I love the opportunity to be able to do 4 or 5 different things, as opposed to just, I did news gen. I started teaching in my 16th year of owning news gen. Yeah. But for 16 years, that is all I did every single day. And then once I started teaching and my brother and I flip houses and then consulting. And so it just brings a lot more richness to what I do.
And imagine if you listened to your own inner voice that thought you weren't worth anything. And then, and look at what a difference it is in the world. And so I'm so happy for you. I assume people can find you on LinkedIn. Anywhere else they should go?
No, I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And I think that's where I put a lot of my thought leadership information.
Awesome. Well, Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Carrie. It was so fun.